The council chamber of the Interstellar Assembly had not been opened in 300 cycles. Dust hung in the artificial gravity fields like frozen fog, and the enormous circular table, designed to seat representatives from 37 species, showed the wear of millennia. But today, the chamber hummed with power. Lights flickered along the curved walls. Translation units warmed up in 18 different frequencies. Ambassador Varric of the Thulian Empire stood at his designated position, his 4 arms folded across his armored chest. His species had dominated galactic politics for 6,000 years. They had brokered peace between the Vorath Collective and the Xylan Federation. They had ended the Great Resource War through sheer diplomatic pressure. When Varric spoke, the galaxy listened. But today, his words would land like stones in still water. The chamber filled slowly. Representatives from 23 spacefaring species took their places. The insectoid Catharn clicked mandibles at the humans across the table. The gas-based drifters pulsed nervous colors through their containment suits. Even the ancient Ussar, who had witnessed the birth of stars, seemed unsettled by this summons. By ancient law, Varric began, his voice translated into every language simultaneously. This council convenes only when a threat to all civilized species emerges. I have called this session because such a threat exists. The human representative, a woman named Tessa Marlowe, sat motionless. She was unremarkable by her species standards, average height, brown skin, close-cropped gray hair. But her eyes tracked every speaker, every movement, every flicker of color from the drifters. She had learned to read aliens the way her ancestors read predators. The human species, Varric continued, must be permanently banned from all future warfare. The chamber erupted. Catharn screeched their objections. The floating Vorath delegates pulsed angry red. Even the reserved Ussar stirred, their crystalline forms shifting with visible discomfort. Only the humans remained still. Tessa Marlowe did not blink. This is absurd. The Catharn delegate's translator crackled with indignation. Humans have fought exactly 1 interstellar war against us, and they lost 3/4 of their fleet. They did not lose, Varric said quietly. They made you withdraw. Silence fell. The Catharn delegate's mandibles froze mid-click. Varric pressed a control on his podium. The central holographic display flickered to life, showing star charts, battle recordings, and data streams that made several delegates lean back in alarm. The Catharn-human war lasted 9 standard months, Varric said. By every conventional measure, the Catharn should have won in 3 weeks. Their fleet outnumbered human defenses 40-1. Their weapons outranged human kinetics by a factor of 12. Their soldiers were bred for combat while humans were. He paused. What were you, Ambassador Marlowe, merchants, explorers, artists? Tessa Marlowe finally spoke. Her voice was calm. We were survivors. Varric nodded slowly. Yes, that is precisely the problem. The holographic display shifted to show the first engagement of the war. The images were grainy, captured from Catharn scout drones, but they showed something impossible. A human freighter, unarmed and unarmored, turning to face a Catharn destroyer. They rammed it, Varric said. A cargo vessel worth less than the paint on the destroyer's hull. They accelerated to maximum thrust and drove their ship through the destroyer's bridge section. Both crews died. They attacked our colony, Tessa said. We defended it. You had no weapons, no military training, no hope of surviving the engagement. We survived. The holographic display changed again. Now it showed a human ground base, surrounded by Catharn infantry. The humans inside had barricaded every entrance and were firing from narrow slits cut into the walls. Standard siege tactics. The Catharn brought up heavy artillery and began reducing the base to rubble. Then the recording shifted to thermal imaging. Notice the heat signatures, Varric said. The humans are not retreating into a central bunker. They are spreading out, digging tunnels, creating firing positions in the ruins. So, the Vorath delegates' confusion was evident. Standard delaying action. They had no reinforcements coming, no evacuation planned. Their fleet had already been shattered. Their planetary defense grid was gone. Varric let the weight of his words settle. They were not delaying. They were planning to fight until every human was dead, and they wanted to take as many K-Tharn with them as possible. The chamber temperature seemed to drop. Tessa Marlowe stood up slowly. She was shorter than most beings in this room, but something about her posture made the drifters pull back in their containment suits. "We did not start that war," she said. "The K-Tharn came to our system. They bombed our cities. They killed 3 billion of our people before we even understood what was happening. And when we asked for surrender terms, they offered slavery or extinction." She looked around the table at each delegate in turn. "You want to ban us from war? Fine. But understand why the K-Tharn really withdrew. Understand why no species has attacked us since. We are not the strongest species in this galaxy. We are not the fastest or the smartest or the most advanced." Her gaze settled on Varric. "We are the ones who will not stop. We are the ones who will burn our own worlds before we let you take them. We are the ones who will follow you across the galaxy if you harm our people. You are not afraid of our weapons. You are afraid of our refusal to die." The silence that followed was absolute. Varric finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is why the Council must act, not because humanity is a threat now, because if they ever choose to become one." He left the sentence unfinished. The vote would come tomorrow, but as the delegates filed out of the chamber, each one glanced at the human ambassador. She stood alone by her podium, watching them leave with those predator-calibrated eyes. And every single delegate knew, with terrible certainty, that Varric was right. The K-Tharn war room had not been designed for comfort. It had been designed for efficiency, curved walls covered in tactical displays, command chairs arranged in concentric rings, and a central holographic tank that could project fleet movements across 3 dimensions. High Admiral Thrax stood at the tank's edge, his scaled fingers tracing the glowing icons that represented his armada. 47 capital ships, 200 support vessels, 50,000 elite warriors bred for loyalty and aggression. Against a single human colony called New Horizon. "Report," Thrax growled. His tactical officer, a younger K-Tharn named Vex, hesitated. That hesitation alone told Thrax everything he needed to know. Vex had served under him for 12 cycles. He had never hesitated. "The landing forces have stopped advancing, High Admiral." "Stopped or encountered resistance." Vex's mandibles clicked in the equivalent of a human grimace. "Both. The humans. They are not fighting the way our intelligence predicted." Thrax turned to face the holographic display. He had studied the human species before this campaign began. Soft bodies, no natural weapons, no armor, no claws, no venom. They had developed technology to compensate for their physical weaknesses, but their military doctrine was laughably primitive. They relied on something called combined arms and maneuver warfare, concepts the K-Tharn had abandoned 10,000 years ago in favor of overwhelming force. "This is a farming colony," Thrax said. "Their population is 50,000. We dropped 30,000 warriors on their heads. What is the problem?" Vex expanded the tactical display. Red icons showed K-Tharn positions. Blue icons showed human resistance. The blue icons were everywhere, not clustered in defensive positions, but scattered through every building, every tunnel, every drainage pipe. "They are not defending the colony," Vex said. "They are defending every meter of ground. We take a building and humans attack us from the basement. We clear a street and humans shoot at us from the sewers. We advance and they fall back to new positions. We rest and they attack our supply lines." Thrax's tail twitched with irritation. "Standard guerrilla tactics. We have faced this before. Burn the buildings, flush them out." "We tried." Vex's voice dropped. The humans set fire to their own structures before we could. They are using the smoke as cover. Our thermal sensors cannot distinguish between burning debris and body heat. For the first time in his long military career, High Admiral Thrax felt something unfamiliar. It was not fear exactly. More like the sensation of standing on unstable ground, of realizing that the rules you had trained under no longer applied. "Show me the first wave deployment," he ordered. The holographic display rewound. Thrax watched his warriors drop from orbit in their assault pods, landing in neat formation around the colony's perimeter. Textbook insertion. The human defensive fire had been weak, small arms, civilian vehicles converted into gun platforms. Nothing that could threaten armored Catharn infantry. Then the humans stopped shooting. "They ceased fire?" Thrax asked. 6 minutes into the engagement, our forward units assumed they had broken. They advanced into the colony's central square. The display showed Catharn warriors moving through empty streets, windows shattered, doors hanging open, the kind of urban environment that Thrax had seen 100 times on 100 conquered worlds. Then the explosives detonated. Not military-grade charges. Mining explosives, agricultural fuel tanks, cooking gas containers rigged with simple timers. The humans had turned their own colony into a trap, wiring entire city blocks to explode when enough Catharn entered. "The casualties?" Thrax asked. 4,000 dead, 2,000 wounded. The second wave refuses to advance without artillery support. Thrax stared at the display. 4,000 warriors, lost to improvised explosives and civilian determination. These creatures had known they were going to lose. They had known their colony would fall. And instead of surrendering or fleeing, they had spent their final hours turning their homes into graves for his soldiers. "High Admiral," Vex said quietly, "there is something else." "Show me." The display shifted to a different angle, a Catharn body camera from the first wave. The warrior had been advancing through a residential building, kicking down doors, checking rooms. Standard room-clearing procedure. In the third room, he found a human female. She was old by their standards, her hair white and her face lined with age. She held no weapon. She stood in the center of the room, surrounded by photographs of what Thrax assumed were her offspring. The Catharn warrior raised his weapon to kill her. She smiled. Then she detonated the explosive vest hidden under her clothes. The camera feed went white. When it cleared, the room was gone. The warrior was gone. The only thing remaining was a crater where the floor used to be. Thrax closed his eyes. He had conquered 97 worlds in his career. He had fought the Vorath, the Xylan, and a dozen minor species. He had never seen anything like this. "They expect to die," he said quietly. "They are not fighting to win. They are fighting to make us pay." "Yes, High Admiral." "And the orbital situation." Vex's hesitation returned. He brought up a second display showing the space around New Horizon. Human ships, converted freighters, mining vessels, even personal yachts, were forming a loose formation between the colony and the Catharn fleet. "They are trying to block our orbital bombardment," Vex said. "They have no weapons that can hurt us." "They know." Thrax watched the tiny human ships drift into position. They were not trying to attack his fleet. They were trying to shield their planet, to force the Catharn to shoot through them to reach the colony below. "How many ships?" 112, all civilian, crewed by volunteers who know they are going to die. Thrax made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Order the fleet to open fire, clear a path. Vex hesitated one final time. "High Admiral, are we certain this is the correct course?" Thrax looked at the human ships on his display, at the old woman's smile frozen in the afterimage of her own destruction, at a species that had looked into the abyss and decided to drag everyone else down with them. "Fire," he said. But even as his weapons charged, he knew this war would never end the way Catharn wars ended. There would be no surrender ceremony, no conquered population to exploit, only silence and rubble and the terrible knowledge that somewhere out there more humans were waiting. And they would remember. The Battle of the Broken Spine earned its name from the asteroid field where it was fought. A dense ring of fractured rock and metallic debris circled a dead star, creating a natural fortress that had never been claimed by any species. Too dangerous for mining, too unstable for colonization. But on the 43rd day of the Catharn-Human War, it became the graveyard of two fleets. Commander Elias Voss had not slept in 72 hours. His ship, the Last Stand, was a heavy cruiser with a crew of 800. It had been launched from Earth's orbital shipyard 3 weeks before the Catharn arrived, part of a desperate emergency construction program that welded hulls together before the paint could dry. The Last Stand had no shakedown crews, no combat trials. The first time its weapons fired in anger, half the targeting systems crashed and needed manual reset. But it was still flying. That was more than could be said for most of the fleet. The Catharn Advance Force is entering the asteroid field, his navigation officer reported. 15 capital ships, 40 escorts. They are spreading out to search for us. Elias gripped the armrest of his command chair. His knuckles were white. The Last Stand was the last human warship in this sector. The rest had been destroyed, crippled, or forced to retreat to Earth's defensive perimeter. If the Catharn broke through here, they would reach the homeworld in 3 days. How many civilians are left on the colony stations? His executive officer, a woman named Myra Torres, checked her display. 12,000. Evacuation transports are still loading. Then we hold. Elias turned to his tactical officer. Status of the reactor modification. The tactical officer paled. Commander, I strongly advise against. I didn't ask for your advice. I asked for the status. It's ready, but if we do this, we won't have enough power to jump out of the field. We'll be stranded. Elias nodded slowly. He had known this would be the case from the moment he conceived the plan. The Last Stand would not survive the battle. Neither would her crew. But the 12,000 civilians on the colony stations might. Bring us about, he said. Plot an intercept course with the Catharn flagship. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member knew what that meant. The Catharn flagship was a dreadnought 4 times the size of the Last Stand. It carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. A direct confrontation would be suicide. But Elias wasn't planning to fight the dreadnought. He was planning to feed it. The reactor overload sequence, he said quietly. Set it for 10 minutes after we enter weapons range, and lock out the safeties. Myra turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable. Elias, the crew should vote on this. There's nothing to vote on. We are the only ship between the Catharn and 12,000 civilians. We do our duty. And the crew's families, their children. Elias closed his eyes. He had a daughter. She was 6 years old, waiting for him on Earth. He would never see her again. But she would grow up in a world that was still free, still human, still alive. That was worth any price. Engineering, he said into the ship's intercom. Begin reactor spin-up, full military power. The Last Stand surged forward, diving into the asteroid field with all the grace of a wounded whale. The Catharn fleet detected her immediately. Targeting locks flashed across the bridge displays. Warning klaxons blared. Evasive pattern Delta, Elias ordered. Keep us behind the largest asteroids. Use them as shields. The Last Stand twisted through the debris field, trading paint with rock and metal. Catharn weapons fire melted asteroids behind them, sending molten fragments spinning into the void. One of the escorts exploded when a chunk of superheated debris pierced its engine section. 10 more seconds to weapons range, Myra reported. Reactor status. Critical, temperature rising faster than expected. We might not have 10 minutes. Elias smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Then we make every second count. The last stand cleared the final asteroid and found herself facing the Catharn dreadnought. The enemy ship filled the view screen, a mountain of armored hull, bristling with weapons, batteries, and fighter bays. It was beautiful in the way a natural disaster was beautiful, inevitable and terrible. All weapons, Elias said, fire at will. The last stand unleashed everything she had. Missiles, railgun rounds, energy beams, a final, desperate salvo thrown directly at the dreadnought's bridge section. Most of it splashed harmlessly against the enemy's shields. A few rounds penetrated, carving gouges in the hull, but failing to reach anything vital. The Catharn returned fire. The last stand shook like a leaf in a hurricane. Armor plating peeled away. Atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches. Crew members who had not strapped in were thrown across compartments, bones breaking, screams lost in the roar of escaping air. Reactor breach in 2 minutes, engineering reported. Maybe less. Hold course, Elias said. The last stand kept moving forward, straight toward the dreadnought's main hull. The Catharn must have realized what was happening, because their fire intensified. They were trying to destroy the human ship before it reached them. But humans were very good at staying alive, just long enough. 1 minute. The last stand crossed into extreme close range. The dreadnought's point defense weapons could no longer track something so small and so fast. The human cruiser plunged into the shadow of the enemy ship, riding the edge of its shields like a surfer riding a wave. 30 seconds. Elias opened a channel to the colony stations. This is Commander Voss of the last stand. We have done all we can. Get out of here. Live. 10 seconds. The reactor warning lights turned red. The temperature had passed every safety limit. The containment field was failing. 5 seconds. Elias thought of his daughter, her laughter, her stubborn refusal to eat vegetables. The way she said his name like it was the most important word in the universe. Goodbye. The last stand detonated. Her reactor core, pushed beyond all sane parameters, became a small star. The explosion vaporized the human ship instantly and tore into the Catharn dreadnought's unshielded hull. The dreadnought's own reactors, damaged by the blast, went critical 3 seconds later. 2 ships, 40,000 Catharn crew, 800 humans. Gone. The shockwave rippled through the asteroid field, shattering rocks and sending debris flying in every direction. 3 Catharn escorts were crushed by the expanding wave of metal and energy. The rest scattered, their formation broken, their flagship destroyed. The colony stations, warned by Elias' final transmission, jumped to safety. And in the silence that followed, the galaxy learned something new about humanity. They did not surrender, they did not retreat, they turned themselves into weapons. The Council archive stretched for kilometers beneath the assembly building, a labyrinth of data crystals and preservation fields that held the complete recorded history of every spacefaring species. Most delegates had never visited this place. It was for scholars and historians, not politicians. But Varric had spent 3 weeks down here, alone, reading everything the Council had on humanity. He had not slept well since. The first incident was New Horizon, he said, his voice echoing in the archive's reading chamber. But it was not the last. Across the table sat 3 beings, the Ussar Elder Xylos, the Vorath Collective's chief xenopsychologist, and a human military historian who had requested anonymity. Varric had needed to call in 17 favors to arrange this meeting. The Battle of the Broken Spine convinced the Catharn to negotiate, Xylos said. But the war ended shortly after. What other incidents could there be? The human historian, a man named only as Witness, activated a display crystal. Images flickered to life. The war ended, yes, but humanity never stopped preparing. Every colony, every station, every ship was built with one question in mind. What do we do if someone attacks us here? The first image showed a gas mining facility orbiting a Class 4 hydrogen giant. Standard design, used by a dozen species across the galaxy. But the human version had modifications. Those towers along the outer ring, witness said. They are not part of the mining operation. They are resonance emitters. If the facility is captured, the crew can trigger a chain reaction in the gas giant's atmosphere. The resulting explosion would destroy everything within 1,000,000 kilometers. That's madness, the Vorath xenopsychologist said. Why would anyone build such a thing? Because humans believe that if they cannot have something, no one will. Varric felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen this behavior in other contexts, a cornered animal, willing to destroy itself rather than be captured. But to see it systematized, built into the very architecture of human civilization. The second incident occurred during the Xylan border dispute, witness continued. 5 years after the Catharn War, a human exploration vessel strayed into Xylan territory. The Xylans seized the ship and imprisoned the crew. The display showed a Xylan prison facility. Then it showed the same facility 6 hours later. Human prisoners had smuggled a biological agent into their own cells. They released it during a shift change. The agent was harmless to humans but lethal to Xylan. 40 guards died. The prisoners walked out through the front gates. They weaponized their own bodies, Xylos whispered. They weaponized everything. Their ships, their colonies, their prisoners, their dead. Witness's voice was flat, clinical. In the first 10 years after first contact, humans developed more ways to die fighting than most species develop in 1,000 years. They do not see this as disturbing. They see it as practical. Varric leaned forward, but the Catharn withdrew. The Xylan backed down. Why did humanity stop fighting? Because they won. The display shifted to show a map of human space. It was tiny compared to the other empires. A handful of star systems, none particularly rich in resources or strategically valuable. Look at this, witness said. Every human colony is within 2 jumps of Earth. Every human ship can reach reinforcements in less than a week. Their entire civilization is built around a single principle, defensive depth. They do not need to conquer territory because they have already fortified every centimeter of the territory they hold. The outer systems, Varric said slowly. The mining colonies, the research stations, the trade outposts, they are not extensions of human civilization. They are the walls. Yes. Silence fell over the reading chamber. Varric looked at the images on the display, the modified mining facility, the prison break, the civilian ships that had rammed Catharn destroyers. He saw patterns now that he had missed before. A species that had looked at the galaxy, seen the predators circling, and decided to become the thing that predators feared. The council will vote tomorrow, Varric said. I have prepared my arguments, but I need to know, is there anything else? Anything that might convince the delegates to act? Witness hesitated. Then he activated a final image. This was recorded 6 weeks ago. A pirate fleet attacked a human transport carrying medical supplies to a colony. The pirates were from the Scourge, a species known for their brutality. They outgunned the transport 50-1. The image showed a space battle, if it could be called that. The transport did not run, did not surrender. It broadcast a single message on all frequencies. We are carrying medicine for sick children. If you fire on us, we will find you. The pirates fired. The transport exploded. 3 days later, witness said, every member of that pirate fleet was dead. Not captured, not imprisoned, dead. Killed by human civilians who tracked them across 3 systems using nothing but civilian navigation data and sheer determination. Varric stared at the image, the transport's debris field, the medical supplies drifting in the void. The pirates had families, witness continued, crew members, support networks in the scourge criminal underworld. The humans found them all. They did not ask for justice. They did not wait for council intervention. They simply removed the threat. How many humans died in the retaliation? None. The humans never fired a shot. They poisoned the pirates' fuel supplies, sabotaged their life support, released navigation data that led rival gangs to their hideouts. Witness paused. They were not soldiers. They were doctors, engineers, teachers, people who had never held a weapon in their lives. Varric looked at the Ussar elder. Xylos's crystalline form had dimmed to a dark, troubled gray. "This is why the council must act," Varric said. "Not because humanity is a threat to us now, but because if we ever push them far enough, if we ever make them decide that fighting is the only option." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The archive's preservation fields hummed softly, preserving the memory of 1,000 species, 1,000,000 wars, 1,000,000,000 deaths. And in that quiet room, 4 beings sat in the dark, trying to understand a species that had turned survival into an art form. Tomorrow the council would vote. Tonight, Varric wondered if any vote could stop what was coming. The Vorath xenopsychologist's name was Quell, and she had spent 40 years studying the minds of hostile species. She had interviewed Catharn war criminals. She had analyzed Vorath insurgents. She had written the definitive text on cross-species conflict resolution. But nothing in her career had prepared her for the human brain. "The problem," she explained to the council's subcommittee, "is not that humans are aggressive. Many species are aggressive. The Catharn evolved as pack hunters. The scourge are territorial beyond reason. Aggression is common." She pulled up a holographic model of a human brain, color-coded to show activity patterns during stress. "The problem is that humans do not experience fear the way we do." Ambassador Varric leaned forward. He had requested this briefing before the final vote, hoping that scientific evidence would sway the undecided delegates. "Explain." Quell expanded the model. "Every species we have studied has a fear response designed to promote survival. When threatened, the brain evaluates options: fight, flee, freeze, or submit. Submission is critical. It allows the individual to survive encounters with superior forces, to wait for rescue, to negotiate surrender." She highlighted a specific region of the human brain. "Humans have this evaluation system too, but their submission response is broken." "Broken how?" "In laboratory conditions, when we expose human subjects to inescapable threats, their brains do not trigger submission. Instead, they trigger a sustained fight response that can last for days, weeks, months." The subcommittee murmured. Such a thing was unheard of. Even the most aggressive species eventually submitted when victory became impossible. "We believe this is an evolutionary adaptation," Quell continued. "Earth is what humans call a high-mortality environment. Their ancestors evolved as persistence hunters, chasing prey for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. This required a brain that could override exhaustion, pain, and fear to continue pursuing a goal." "So humans cannot stop fighting," Varric said. "Worse, humans cannot conceive of stopping. When we interview human veterans, they describe surrender as a failure of character, not a tactical necessity. They use phrases like death before dishonor and never give up. These are not slogans. They are core beliefs." One of the undecided delegates, a crustacean-like being from the Tarthais Trade Coalition, raised a claw. "But surely humans value their lives. Self-preservation is universal." Quell shook her head. "Self-preservation is not universal among humans. They value the survival of their group above the survival of themselves. A human will die to protect their offspring, their mate, their community. They will die to protect complete strangers if they believe those strangers belong to their species." She brought up historical records from Earth. "Look at this. A human ship carrying passengers hits an iceberg. There are not enough lifeboats. The humans do not fight for survival. The men stand aside and let the women and children board first. They choose to die. The Tarthais delegates' claws clacked together nervously. That is not rational. No, it is not, but it is human. Varric stood and walked to the display. He studied the images of humans sacrificing themselves for strangers, for ideals, for species-wide concepts like freedom and justice. These were not biological imperatives. They were stories humans told themselves, stories that had become so deeply embedded in their psychology that they overrode basic survival instincts. You said their fear response is broken, Varric said, but it is not broken. It is different. They do not run because they cannot imagine a world where running would help. Quell nodded slowly. Exactly. Humans do not surrender. They do not retreat permanently. They might fall back to regroup. They might pretend to surrender to gain tactical advantage. But in their minds, the fight never ends. It just pauses. She brought up one final piece of data. A recording from the human Catharn War, intercepted communications between human soldiers. We're surrounded. Good, we can fire in any direction. There's 100 of them and 6 of us. Then we only have to kill 17 each. That's not impossible. The Tarthais delegate made a sound like water boiling. They are joking about being outnumbered while dying. Yes, Quell said. That is another human trait. They use humor to cope with mortal terror. It is not bravery in the way we understand it. It is a refusal to acknowledge that the situation is hopeless. Varric turned to face the subcommittee. 23 species, 23 different ways of understanding fear, survival, and the value of life, but only one species that had turned death into a tactical resource. You see now why we cannot allow them to fight, he said quietly. It is not because they would win. It is because they would never stop. Every war with humanity would be a war without end. Even if we destroyed every human ship, every human colony, every human world, the survivors would keep fighting. They would fight in the rubble. They would fight in the caves. They would fight with rocks and sticks in their own hands. He looked at the human representative, who was not present at this briefing, but whose presence haunted the room anyway. Other species wage war to achieve objectives. Humans wage war because they are alive, and being alive means fighting. We cannot negotiate with that. We cannot deter it. We can only contain it. The subcommittee voted unanimously. The full council would convene in 1 hour. As the delegates filed out, Quell stayed behind. She stared at the human brain model, still glowing on the display. You are not telling them everything, Varric said. Quell did not look at him. No. What are you leaving out? She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, the other species in this galaxy evolved on worlds where danger was predictable. Seasons changed. Predators followed patterns. Prey species had escape routes. Evolution favored the cautious, the strategic, the patient. She turned to face him. Her alien eyes, adapted for a world of twilight and shadows, seemed to hold a fear she could not quite suppress. Humans evolved on a world where danger was random. Earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, predators that came from the sky, the sea, the ground. They never knew what would kill them next, so their brains adapted differently. They did not learn to hide. They learned to fight everything, always, because on Earth, if you stopped fighting, something would kill you. Varric felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. The other species in this galaxy, Quell continued, learned to fear death. Humans learned to make death afraid of them. The council chamber was filling with delegates. The vote would happen soon. Varric would make his case, and the galaxy would decide humanity's fate. But as he walked toward the chamber, he could not stop thinking about Quell's words, about a species that had looked into the abyss so many times that the abyss had learned to look away. The vote would pass, he was certain of that. What happened after the vote? That was something no one could predict. The council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Tessa Marlowe rose to speak. The vote had been unanimous. 23 species, including the Catharn who had once tried to conquer Earth, had agreed that humanity must be banned from all future warfare. No human soldiers, no human warships, no human weapons of any kind. The punishment for violation was total economic isolation, a death sentence for any species dependent on interstellar trade. Varric watched Tessa's face as she approached the central podium. He expected anger, resignation, perhaps a desperate plea for reconsideration. He saw none of those things. She looked tired, not defeated, just tired the way a parent looks tired after explaining the same thing to a child for the 100th time. On behalf of the human species, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber without amplification, we accept your terms. A murmur rippled through the delegates. They had expected a fight, arguments, appeals, threats, not acceptance. However, Tessa continued, I am required to inform this council of certain facts before the ban takes effect. Varric's forearms tightened across his chest. What facts? Tessa smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. First, humanity already has no warships. We dismantled our military fleet 5 years ago, after the last Catharn reparations were paid. The ships you saw in our space were cargo vessels, colony transports, and mining platforms. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted over each other, demanding clarification, verification, anything. The second fact, Tessa said, speaking over the chaos, is that we have no standing army, no trained soldiers, no officer corps. What you call our military is actually our emergency response service. They build bridges, deliver medicine, and evacuate disaster zones. Varric's translator struggled to keep up with the multiple languages being shouted at once. He raised his forearms for silence. You are telling us, he said slowly, that we have just banned humanity from a war they were not fighting. I am telling you, Tessa replied, that you have banned humanity from a war we never wanted, but you have not banned us from defending ourselves, and you have not banned us from existing. She turned to face the delegates one by one, the same predator-calibrated gaze that had unnerved them all at the first meeting. Your ban says we cannot build warships. It does not say we cannot build cargo ships with reinforced hulls. It says we cannot train soldiers. It does not say we cannot train pilots, mechanics, and rescue divers. It says we cannot possess weapons. It does not say we cannot possess mining equipment, cutting torches, and atmospheric processors. The Tarthai's delegate's claws clicked nervously. You are describing loopholes. We are describing survival. Tessa's voice hardened. You want to ban humanity from war. Fine, we will accept that. But understand what you are accepting. You are accepting that every human ship will still be built to withstand attack. Every human colony will still be fortified. Every human citizen will still know how to fight because on Earth, fighting is what you do when everything else fails. She stepped back from the podium. You have made us safe from war. You have not made us safe. There is a difference. Varric felt the room shift. The other delegates were beginning to understand what he had realized in the archive. Humanity was not being disarmed. They were being formalized. The ban did not stop them from being dangerous. It just gave everyone else a reason to pretend they were safe. This council will monitor your compliance, Varric said. If we find evidence of military preparation. You will find evidence of preparation. Tessa cut him off. Because we prepare for everything, storms, earthquakes, pandemics, and yes, invasions, that is what humans do. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best. The ban does not change that. She gathered her documents and walked toward the chamber's exit. At the door, she paused and turned back. One more thing. You should know that humanity has already begun work on a new propulsion system. It is not a weapon. It is a drive system designed to allow civilian ships to escape conflict zones faster, but it will have the side effect of making our cargo vessels the fastest ships in the galaxy. She let that sink in. Fast ships, reinforced hulls, and a population that knows how to fight. That is not a military. That is just humanity. The doors closed behind her. Varric stood at his podium, staring at the empty space where the human ambassador had been. The other delegates were talking, debating, arguing about enforcement measures and inspection protocols. But Varric was not listening. He was thinking about a species that had turned a ban on warfare into a challenge. A species that would now spend every waking moment finding new ways to be dangerous without technically violating the treaty. He was thinking about the human woman's smile as she walked out the door. And he realized, with terrible certainty, that the galaxy had not made itself safe from humanity. It had simply taught humanity a new way to hunt. 3 years after the ban, the Scourge made a mistake. They had been watching the human border for months, looking for weaknesses. The ban meant no human warships, no human weapons, no human soldiers. The Scourge warlords saw opportunity where others saw a wasteland. A human transport, the Star of Hope, was carrying medical supplies to a colony on the edge of human space. The Scourge sent 15 attack ships to intercept it. A simple raid, easy pickings. They did not know that the Star of Hope was crewed by veterans of the Catharn War. Old men and women who had watched their friends die at New Horizon, who had felt the shockwave of the Last Stand sacrifice, who had spent 3 years learning exactly how far they could push the ban without breaking it. The Scourge attack ships dropped out of warp and found themselves facing not a single transport, but a formation of 40 human cargo vessels. "Back off," the Star of Hope broadcast. "We are carrying medicine for sick children. We are not worth dying for." The Scourge warlord laughed and ordered his ships to attack. He was still laughing when the first wave of human missiles, technically classified as emergency decoys, tore through his escorts. He was still laughing when the cargo vessels, technically unarmed, used their reinforced hulls to ram his flanking ships. He was still laughing when the human boarding parties, technically rescue personnel, breached his bridge and put a plasma torch to his command console. He stopped laughing when the human leader, a woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, knelt beside him and spoke. "You should have left us alone." The Scourge fleet was destroyed, not captured, not driven off, destroyed. Every ship, every crew member, every trace of the raiding force was erased from existence. The human cargo vessels returned to their roots, delivering medicine and food and hope to colonies that would never know how close they came to death. The council convened an emergency session. "The humans violated the ban," the Tarthai's delegate argued. "They used weapons. They boarded an enemy vessel. They defended themselves," Varric said quietly. "The ban allows for self-defense." "They destroyed 15 ships." "The ban does not specify a limit on how many ships can be destroyed in self-defense." Varric rubbed his temples. He had aged visibly in the 3 years since the ban. The humans followed the letter of the law. They used no warships, no standing military, no dedicated weapons platforms. They used cargo vessels, rescue personnel, and emergency decoys. "This is absurd." "Yes, it is." Varric stood and faced the council. "We made a mistake. We thought we could contain humanity by banning them from war. But war is not what makes humans dangerous. War is what happens when humans have exhausted all other options. What we saw today was not war. It was self-defense. And it was more devastating than most species' total military campaigns." The chamber fell silent. "The Scourge will not attack human space again," Varric continued. "The Catharn have not attacked human space since the war ended. The Xylan, the Vorath, the Drifters, none of them will risk a confrontation with humanity, not because humans have weapons, but because humans refuse to lose." He looked at the empty chair where Tessa Marlowe used to sit. She had retired after the vote, returned to Earth to teach at a university. Her replacement was a young man named David, who sat in the human delegation with the same predator-calibrated eyes. "Your species terrifies us," Varric said to David. "Do you understand that?" David nodded. "Yes, we know." "And you do not care." "We care, but we cannot change what we are." David leaned forward. "Ambassador Varric, my species has a saying, 'Speak softly and carry a big stick.' It means that true strength does not need to be displayed. It only needs to exist." He gestured to the holographic display, showing the debris field of the Scourge fleet. "We do not want to fight. We do not want to conquer. We want to trade and explore and build. But we will not let anyone take those things from us. Not the Scourge, not the Catharn, not the Council itself." Varric felt the weight of those words. The ban was still in place. It would remain in place. But it had not made the galaxy safer. It had made the galaxy more careful. And that perhaps was the point. The Star of Hope docked at its destination 3 days later. The medical supplies were unloaded. The children received their medicine. The colony celebrated the arrival of the transport, unaware of the battle that had been fought to protect it. The crew of the Star of Hope did not celebrate. They did not see themselves as heroes. They saw themselves as survivors, doing what survivors had always done. Captain Mara Chen, no, that name was banned. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck, watching the colony's sun rise over a world that was still free. "Captain," a young crew member approached her. "The Council is calling for another hearing. They want to discuss additional restrictions." Elena did not turn around. "Let them talk. They might ban civilian ships from carrying decoys, or reinforced hulls, or—" "Let them try." Elena finally turned, her face half-lit by the alien sun. "Every time they ban something, we will find something else. Every time they close a door, we will open a window. That is what we do. We adapt. We survive." The young crew member nodded slowly. "And if they push us too far, if they try to disarm us completely?" Elena's smile was the same smile Tessa Marlowe had worn when she walked out of the council chamber. The same smile the old woman on New Horizon had worn before she detonated her explosive vest. The same smile that had haunted Varric's dreams for 3 years. "Then they will learn why the galaxy fears humanity." She turned back to the window. The sun was rising, painting the colony in shades of gold and red. Somewhere out there, the council was meeting. Somewhere out there, species were debating, legislating, trying to contain a threat they could not understand. But Elena Vasquez did not care about any of that. She was a human. She was alive, and as long as she was alive, she would fight. Not because she wanted to. Because that was what humans did.